Good morning, y'all. Happy Michaelmas. Today I am making blackberry jam, which is on its way of boiling over. So I'm going to lower the heat on this. All I've added thus far is the fresh blackberries. I covered them with water, and now I just added a cup of sugar. So I take it down to a low simmer, and then let that do its magic. There you can see those beautiful blackberries releasing their magic into that deliciousness. Okay, so let's not advertise for anyone. All right, so what we got going on here is a delicious gluten-free bread recipe that I am making for the dragon bread. Thus far, I've measured out 2 cups of brown rice flour, and I'm then following up with 2 cups of tapioca flour and 2 cups of sorghum. And then what I have going on here is a delicious recipe that unfortunately cannot be found online that I know of, but I can add the notes about the recipe and the ingredients and such, and directions in the link below. And then I am excited because dragon bread is called dragon bread because you actually shape it into a dragon, and then you decorate it with scales, which is going to be almond slices, and then you can use dried cherries or cranberries for the eyes, and then I even got almond. I have almond slices. Show you, I guess it's easiest. Sorry for my dirty kitchen here. Then we have these almond slices, but then we also have the thin elongated slices that will be little claws for our dragon. So let's get this going. So the recipe is fairly easy. What it is it's 6 cups of flour, and you can decide what flours you want to use pretty much. It does recommend buckwheat, it recommends quinoa. Our recipe is usually brown rice, white rice, sorghum. I don't have white rice today, so I'm using tapioca flour instead, which works just fine. I am going to be trying out this recipe a little bit of a different way. I'm going to add egg to it next time I give it a go. And, hello flour. And the reason being is that this is a delicious recipe, but honestly, with the lack of, how do I say this? It's a very dense bread. The day of, it's freshly baked and it's delicious and no qualms, no issues. It is fabulous. But then, after it's cooled off and Saturday, it's just lost a lot of its greatness. So I was thinking that if I added egg to it, well, we lose the fact that it would be vegan, but then we might gain some moisture and fluffiness, and maybe it just wouldn't be as dense. So I'm going to give that a try and see how we fare. This is the sorghum flour. Which I learned that some countries get it as like their emergency aid food. I don't know if they get flour or they get a grain, but I've heard it's not highly desired, if you will, which I can understand, but it works lovely for this recipe. Let's check on this blackberry jam here. Giving it a stir. You need to stir it every now and then so the sugars don't start sticking to the bottom. And we might get a burnt thing happening in there. Okay, now the next step is to add the salt and whisk this together. So hopefully my little one will wake up fairly soon. She has been very tired since we started school, which is wonderful and great. I'm happy. It means her body's getting the exercise and her brain is getting the exercise as well. So it calls for a tablespoon of salt. I'm a salt fan, so I'm going to add another teaspoon on top of that because I feel that the salt really does get lost somewhere in the flour, and it does need a little extra oomph. Pardon me, I have a little bit of a stuffy nose. We're in the northern hemisphere here, and we have really been gifted a real bang, bang, bang into autumn. We had, let me see, today is the 3rd of October, and we had 2 hot days, no, 3, I would say 3 hot days since September 23rd, which was our first actual day of the autumn equinox. And then, boom, not only did we have a real hearty entry into autumn, we also had a tornado. We live in Davis, California, and that was quite a surprise for pretty much the world. It's actually on YouTube if you want to look it up. Okay, so from here now, so here's my recipe. I just want you to see how much I've loved this and used this, and it's from a Waldorf magazine. I can't remember which one, but let me see here. So the recipe it states is from Zoe Rothfuss, and maybe that might help you find the recipe so you can print it yourself. But this is the one I have, and it has been used for many a year, and it's a good recipe, I have to say. I looked long and hard before this came my way for a gluten-free recipe that you can actually knead, which is an important part of the Waldorf education, especially for your wee ones. You want them to really have a sense of appreciation that things don't just come to you wrapped up all the time in this world. There's actually a bit of work that is involved in having to eat, or whether that be in gardening or baking or whatnot. It's important for children to be a part of this process. And so usually my daughter she'll probably wake up when it's time to knead the bread, which is really her favorite part besides plucking off little tastes. All right, let's see here. What are we going to do next? All right, so this is going to set to the side, and then what I'm going to do is I am going to measure out the olive oil and the honey. I always put the oil in first because I have learned that if you do this, it pours out, I guess you could say, much smoother without sticking to the side of the glass, and then you have to scrape it out. So if you coat your measuring cup with oil first, you get a nice pour, less work, less hassle, less things to clean. It's all great. So I unfortunately have not enough olive oil to complete my half a cup. Oh wait, I have enough. I'm making a half cup total. Woohoo! Life is so beautiful sometimes, how it just all works out. All right, so we're doing a 1/4 cup of olive oil and sweetener of choice. I'm choosing honey. I really like the way it helps add to the flavors of the flowers that I use. I'm sure any sweetener is fine, but as I've used different ones over the years, I really find that honey just gives it that extra delicious bump. And it really seems to just wrap around the flowers and embrace it all with its lovely sweetness. Okay, so there we are. We have our mixture here. I'm going to put that aside. So this is an important part of the recipe. I don't know what they're talking about quite exactly, but to say if you don't mix it quite right, and if you let it sit too long, you're looking at a possible much denser bread. So I'm not sure about all of that because I haven't had that experience myself, but I did also take into account the advice that it was given, and it recommends just basically not adding anything to the wet until you're truly ready. So I just have everything completely measured out and ready to mix in all at once, so that way there isn't any lag time or things are sitting in a wet environment that shouldn't be. So the next part calls for psyllium husk and ground flaxseed. And you want 2/3 of a cup of each of these. But with psyllium husk and flaxseed, they are moisture grabbers. So if you've ever made like a flax egg, you need to understand how it absorbs the water, and you can create an egg out of ground flaxseed and water. So keeping that in mind, I thought, well, let me just mix it all together at once when everything is ready, and that should work out just lovely. And so far it has. Knock on wood. And then I whisk those together. do we have next on the list? Okay, so it says so we're gonna add to our warm water, honey, and yeast mixture the olive oil and honey mixture that I measured out. Well, now look at that. I guess I let it sit too long. My advice is it's gone kerplooey. Alright, well, I'll just get a spatula and get the last of that honey goodness. Now, so the recipe calls for adding everything together in the wet bowl right now. But what I do instead is I actually combine all the dry ingredients first into one bowl, then I add them into the wet bowl. So here we have the flour mixture and salt, and then here is the psyllium husk and flaxseed. So what I do at this point is I mix these together and I give those a whisk. And after I mix this together, woo, camera down, camera up. As you mix something together, at this point, I feel like it's a really good time to start putting some extra love into it. And I'm a firm believer of adding love as the extra ingredient. So sometimes that could be, for me, imagining my friends enjoying the food that I've made for everyone to share. I also tend to blow kisses into my food. So I just give a little kiss, aiming it towards the bowl or pan. It also helps to cook with a smile in your heart and on your face. Okay, so now that those have been combined, the next step is to combine it into the bowl with the yeast and water and honey and oil. Oh my. I find that the little ones can help with the whole process of making the bread, but I feel that it's better if they help really, well, my little one, she helps with the dry measurements and the mixing, as long as it's not too full. If it's too full in the bowl, I find that a lot of times the ingredients find a way of flying right out of that bowl for her. So I tend to have her help with mixing the dry ingredients or pouring, measuring the dry ingredients for me as part of her work. And then I usually have her revisit once it's time to knead the flour. By then I've had a chance of tidying up the kitchen a bit. So she has more space, I have more space, we work well together with more space. And it's time for her to come in and knead the bread after I've mixed it. So as you can see, this is quite a soupy mixture, right? So there is still some dry pockets of flour in here that I'm incorporating it. And just like any baking you do, the more you mix something, the more, how do we say, you have a chance of it becoming denser. So I don't know if that's what happens with the bread or if it's just that it's a gluten-free recipe. But next time I make this, I do want to try, before mixing all the ingredients together, by whisking, I think, 2 eggs together and pouring that in the water and then mixing it all together. I think that the eggs will provide this fluffiness and airiness to the bread and add some, I don't know, I think it'll just give it some give. Alright, now let's see. So at this point, it's still pretty wet, right? You're probably thinking like, how are you possibly going to knead this? So it says to turn it out and add a 1/2 cup of flour. Doesn't it say that? Mix, no. Yeah, and I'm just like, really? At this point, no. How am I going to do that? So even as it sits, you can see here, it is starting to come together more, right? But I don't turn it out on the surface. I add the added 1/2 cup of flour in the bowl and then mix it some more. I just don't think that it has enough dryness to it for me to just turn it onto the counter. I don't think even a floured surface would just help out with that. It has to be drier, and this is, as you can see, it is just really wet, which is fine, but I'm not following the advice of this recipe, and I'm going to add that flour straight in to the bowl, and then I'm going to fold that in, and you shall see how it really drinks up that flour, and it really then becomes something you can knead. And I think at this point it's more appropriate to flip it out onto the floured surface you're going to work on. Okay, so I am going to continue mixing this and give my kitchen a tidy up. So I will make part 2 of the kneading of the bread, and then we will have part 3 where we decorate our dragon and how to shape the dragon bread and so forth and so on. Well, see y'all soon.